The next handful of videos are on semi-related topics. They all kind of revolve around the concepts of equality and prejudice. My commentary on them may not be a critique so much as it is an explainer of why I believe it exists. Because when you begin to comprehend why things are the way they are, you have a better idea of how to treat the issue at the cause rather than just treating the symptoms. The perfect example of that here is that of a crime like petty theft, shoplifting. Traditional thinking when it comes to an increase in crime is to increase policing to catch the perpetrators and increase punishments to discourage the criminal act. This is treating the symptom of the issue. The cause is poverty. People steal what they need when they don't have the money to pay for it. Increasing policing doesn't help with this, nor does increasing the punishments. If you give people the money they need to buy the necessities of life, then there is no need to steal. The loss to businesses is cut and crime decreases. But this again relates back to our warped perspectives as a capitalistic society. If we see taxing the rich as punishing success, then giving money to the poor must therefore be rewarding failure. And people won't pick themselves up by their bootstraps if you reward failure. I want to point out that that was sarcasm, just to be abundantly clear. The bootstraps argument is bullshit. You can't lift yourself up by your bootstraps while you're still wearing your boots. That's the joke. People are mocking you when they say that. With that said, the topic of this video is the ignorance of racism. Wait, racism is ignorant? Shock, horror. Yeah, I know, obviously it's ignorant, but why is it ignorant? Well, it's because we all know that human beings are equal. How do we know this? Well, we have genetic testing that shows that the DNA structure of humans is almost entirely the same. The differences are skin deep, which are literally environmental adaptations. There is no greater or lesser intellectual capacities based on race. The thing is, though, we didn't always know about genetics. We don't instinctively know that we have DNA. It's learned through scientific advancement, which comes through observation and evidence. We live in a time of unprecedented scientific growth, but that wasn't always the case. The analog era developed much slower. Centuries ago, when European empires began exploring and, quote, discovering the world, these white people found cultures of people with darker skin that were less technologically advanced than they were. The general observation was that the darker the skin of the people, the more primitive their technology was. People with black skin were usually nomadic tribal cultures, oftentimes without permanent settlements. Based on that limited evidence, you could easily conclude that intelligence was racially based and that white people were superior in that regard. This ignorance continues today. It's why some people proclaim black people to be low IQ. The thing with this reasoning, though, is that even that perspective has a rhetorical explanation. Necessity is the mother of invention. The human species evolved in Africa. The default skin color for humans is black. Our bodies produce melanin that gives our skin a darker pigment to protect it from sun damage, which, being environmentally adapted, meant a lesser need to invent technology to survive your surroundings. Technology and cultures can remain basic because of the lack of a need to adapt. As humans began to migrate across the earth, we began to adapt to the new environments. Less sunlight meant our bodies didn't need to use as many resources to produce melanin for sun protection, so skin tone got lighter. As our bodies were less adapted to the new environments, our cultures and technology had to advance to meet the needs of our survival. White people came to colonize the world not because of racial superiority, but because of technological superiority. No culture survives unscathed from contact with a technologically superior culture. This is why if aliens do exist, they will most likely never contact us, because of the destructive power of culture shock. White people have been dominant across modern human history, but that white dominance is not the same as white supremacy, nor does it justify that perspective. Racism isn't only a product of ignorance, though. It is used maliciously to divide and dehumanize people. When Australia was first being colonised, the British Empire justified stealing the land through the concept of terra nullius, which is Latin for nobody's land. There's nobody living here, there's nobody who claims to own it, so you can just take it. It's free real estate. While they knew the indigenous people lived here, they didn't view them as human because they were black. They saw them as animals, as just more of the native wildlife, like kangaroos and emus. You wouldn't negotiate with a kangaroo to buy their property, they don't comprehend the ownership of land, so why would you do it with an Aboriginal? Now, let me be clear, I'm not trying to justify the atrocities that colonial Australia committed against our Indigenous people. There is no justification. This is only an explanation of how and why it happened, which should give you some indication of why reconciliation is so important. We not only stole their country, but we also stole generations of their children, and we tried to breed them out of existence. We denied them human rights because we denied them the right to be seen as human. Our humanity rejected theirs. Prime Minister Kevin Rudd gave the national apology in 2008, which was for the stolen generations, but not for everything else we did. And too many people seem to think that we said sorry, so we're all good now. Everyone is equal, so now we can just move on. Reconciliation is done and dusted. But the apology was the start of the process, not the end. We may be equal as human beings, but we are not even when it comes to what our culture did to theirs. It is a stain on our history that will always be there until we make amends, until we properly reconcile what we've done because of who we were, so we can make progress towards becoming who we want to be. But racism in Australia wasn't just towards the Indigenous people, it's also been towards non-white settlers. Australia wasn't always multicultural. It was once a white ethno-state. We had an official white Australia policy. Australia was meant to be the Europe of the Pacific, which meant we only wanted and gave priority to white immigrants. This was only officially repealed in 1973, 11 years before I was born. But my parents, like millions of other Australians, grew up in white Australia. They grew up in a society where racism was normal, where assimilation into the local culture was expected. This is why that sentiment pervades. Even today, we have a strong anti immigrant sentiment. We especially demonize asylum seekers, who are colloquially referred to as boat people, which is dehumanizing, but it's also not as bad as calling them illegal aliens. It's kind of ironic that we demonize people coming here on boats to steal our country when that's exactly what white people did. That's why Australia needs strong maritime borders. The last time it didn't have them, we showed up. The reason why we're taught to dehumanize others is to sow division, to create an us versus them narrative. Tribalism. Why? Well, a poor white person has more in common with a poor black person than they do with a rich white person. So the rich white person proclaims a unity with the poor white person based on a shared position on an imagined racial hierarchy. That way, the poor people never work together and never realize that they are both poor because they are equally being exploited by the rich. Capitalism strikes again. In the interest of full clarity, I want to point out that racism is not just a white colonial culture thing. I can point out and own the racist history and behavior of my culture, even when it's not coming from me, while also acknowledging that there will be black people who hate white people and Asian people who hate other ethnicities of Asian. India has its own caste system, a racial hierarchy just between Indians. Prejudice is a human problem, driven by tribalism and seeded by past atrocities, and only when we discuss it honestly can we make progress towards eliminating it.